something like that.
Welcome to Church Audio Forum. Well, let's see. What's our name again? Church AV Professional Forums. That's it. I'm sorry. It's been a long day, but we're happy to be with you today. I'm here with an eclectic group of individuals, and we're here today to talk about audio. Welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome.
Hello.
Wow, this is every week you guys are you're lacking the enthusiasm about coming here to talk about church AV things. Let's try that again. Welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome.
Hi. Feigned enthusiasm.
I'm ready to talk dirty about audio.
I'm going to pray now. Lord, please have mercy on these gentlemen, but please guide our conversation. Help us to be able to talk about things that really inspire others to spread the gospel and help us to be able to help all those out there. Amen. All right. So this is probably the only YouTube channel where we pray before we actually get into something. But that's because we're talking about church audio. So in no particular order, I have Corel Holness, I have Greg Simpson, I have Alex Holness, and I have Andrew Baker, all of whom have been dealing with church audio for, let's get some years, gentlemen. How many years have you been dealing with church audio?
Oh, man.
Enough.
I actually shudder to think of it. It's been 20 years. I started doing front of house when I was like 16.
Okay, 20 years for Corel.
Yeah, church related audio, definitely 15, about 15 years.
Less than 20.
15 for Greg?
Probably higher than 10.
Well, you're gonna have to deal with it now because your audio just dropped out.
No, so all probably, right. I don't know, I would say probably 14 or 15 years, not necessarily as in depth as you guys, but definitely 14 or 15 years of being involved in church audio.
I actually don't remember. It's over 25 years now where I've been dealing with church audio. It's funny, when I was growing up, our deacons were the one who ran the sound room. It was just a mixing console. And as I got older, I realized how little they actually knew about audio. They didn't know anything except how to push up a fader. You're talking about those Mackie mixers, larger than the 1402. Probably it's a 24 channel mixer, 3-band EQ. I think that was the gist of it. There was no outboard gear. Everything just ran to amplifiers and then ran to the speakers. But they guarded it so sacredly. They wouldn't let anybody touch it, anybody learn. And the idea was that they knew so much more about it than anybody else did. But the truth in my situation was, as I've gotten older and gotten more experience with audio, found out that they didn't know anything. So what has been you guys' experience? Just a brief history of your experience with audio.
Greg, you want to go first, man?
Oh, okay, I guess I can go first. So in my experience, it was, hey, this is how this mixer runs. Don't touch anything, because people that know more than you, have already done all the work on it, kind of thing. And so that's kind of the feel was, but that was just kind of like when I was getting started. But I actually, what I actually have done is I started with like studio recording for fun, and then I transitioned to live sound. So I really actually had about 4 years of experience before I got into, this Youth Vespers program that I used to run sound for.
Okay.
So when I got in there, I was the one that pretended like I knew everything, along with some of these other people. And I'm the one who made every single mistake in the book in the process, which is a great learning experience. I can't recommend that as the fast way. It's the slow way, but it definitely gave me all of the fine details that were worth it. So yeah, history wise, and the more I got into it, the more I realized, oh, maybe I don't know everything. And now at this point, I'm like, now I agree with you. At this point, now I go to church and go, yeah, these people don't know anything. But I've been in their shoes where they thought they knew everything, and it's what you learn after you know it all that really makes the difference.
That's true. That's true. Alex?
Man, I'm trying to remember the phenomenon now, where you think you know everything, and then it's as you get proficiency, you think you know nothing, and then you become an expert and you actually know something. I'm forgetting the name of the phenomenon. I still know nothing. I don't know why I'm here, to be honest. I'm just youth representation. I'm not even that young, to be honest, so I'm not even in the right demographic to claim that anymore.
It's all relative.
I mean, I have some practical experience doing some audio, so I there's a lot to learn and there's a lot I don't know, but I guess I've learned some things along the way.
That's all that matters, right?
My camera.
Yeah. So I mean, for me, each one reach one is kind of the important thing here. So, I got brought on by a couple of the folks that I interacted with in our local steel band, actually, that actually did the sound, and got into that as a kid, and then kind of that morphed into me going into our broadcast room and learning some more about that, and then heading off to school to do it. But I think the big thing is, that early learning process was very rough, many a times bumping your head against the wall, or you have that successful moment and then boom, you ran right into something that just took the wind out of your sails because you thought, okay, I got this now. And then next thing you know is like, no, I don't got this. And then, eventually to the point where you're left running programs by yourself. Those are the triumphal moments, I think, that you step into. And then, of course, I guess the next hierarchy within the church structure was, oh, hey, I get to do a wedding and I get paid for that. So that was always great. But the thing with my experience has been, we actually really do have some folks that were very well skilled and knew down to the nth detail, scientific stuff, math, whatever, of how to use the equipment and how to put it all together. And we're able to kind of work with people at the different levels at which they came in at, and then hopefully develop people up, which actually has been a good tradition within our church. We've had many people fall off this tree of the engineer I'm referring to, and then off the next rungs. So it's a little bit different than most churches, but it's been a great learning experience. And because we're so active and all over the place with different things we do, it gave us a lot of exposure, which was great for when I got ready to go off to school and learn how to do studio work.
I think that's a good point that I want to come back to later in the training aspect. That's a huge thing, especially in today's market, so to speak. How do you train the next generation coming up? Because it was someone who took me under the wing and taught me how to do audio. I'm not, how do we say, I'm not school trained audio engineer, and I know enough to be good. But I've worked with people, some in this circle right here, who are great. So I can see the difference between good and great. Okay? I can come into a system, I can figure it out, I can get it to sound good. But there are gentlemen here, Greg and Carell, who I know can get it to sound great. So tell me, what do you think is the difference between, and the only reason I didn't bring up Alex is because I haven't worked with him to the extent I've worked with the other two gentlemen. So tell me, what is the difference between good and great?
Well, okay. You have, I think there's different levels to things, right? So I'm going to say this. I would say a great engineer knows all the facets of everything, right? All of the components, all of the system things they're working with, all of how they're wired, how to bypass this and go around that and do this and do that, for the different system. If they had to rebuild it, they can do that. but they also have a great ear for hearing everything critically, right? Oh, this is weird, this is out of phase, this is, you know, something different, and be able to just get on it quickly, assess the problem, and then try to correct it very fast, and not cave under the pressure, you know, because that is, I think, a critical thing. You know, the great ones are you know, that's a very, I think, unique class. You know, for the ones that are good, they can hit certain earmarks of certain things, but maybe not everything across the board. I would say that would probably be a good starting point for my assessment of that, but I don't know.
It's a pretty good answer.
I
That's
mean,
it. We didn't bring you all the way over from Michigan to say that's a pretty good answer. Come on.
No, I would say that the difference between good and great is when everything is, you know, for a normal event or showing, you may not see the difference between good and great. When calamity arises, something goes awry, that's when you'll know at the end of it, this person had skills, right? It's how they navigate the unknown and the odd scenarios and a weird troubleshooting in real time and resolve it. Someone who's good might, you know, because when things go wrong, everybody's looking around, you know, they're looking in the back, what's going on? It's like, if I knew, you wouldn't be looking back here. So someone who has a lot of experience and understands innately the stuff that's going on, they will be able to navigate that much more quickly and seamlessly, in some MacGyver fashion, if necessary, than someone who's just good when everything is good.
I think I'm going to split the answer, just because I think your definition of good and great may vary on the context. Between what your audio sounds like and the quality of what you get, good in terms of, you know, a mix or something could be one thing, and great can just be, you know, everything is clear and everything is wonderful. And then you have good and great engineers from the standpoint of being able to do technical troubleshooting. They can tell you all of the specs, they can tell you the voltage it's supposed to run at, but their mixes may not be great. So when it comes to good and great, I think a great engineer has the ability to put the parts and pieces together to get a good final an acceptable final product, and, you know, also understand the technical. But I think we all have unique skills, which is why having a team is very important to be able to leverage both. But I think a great engineer is closer on most of those marks, in terms of being able to do both.
That's actually a very good answer. The team aspect, and how do you develop a good team? How, in your experience, we have collectively a lot of years doing this. Give me a quick story on some of the best teams that you've worked with.
Well, I would say this, right? When it comes down to the projects and you can focus on a particular area and someone else is doing something else and someone else is doing something else, but then when you come to that end result, all the checks are there, every box is checked, and then, you know, you go do your final checks and and all that, and boom, you've got it down pat, right? You know, when you're looking over the shoulder of someone else to try to make sure they were okay, and then the other person's okay, you know, that may work in some cases, but I think when everybody's able to just, okay, we got this list, you're going to deal with the inputs, so you go plug all these in. Okay, you're going to deal with all the microphones, so you're going to clip them up, do what you need to do, and then take all the wires that are being run and you're going to plug those in. Okay, then you're going to work on the desk to, you know, work on the routing for the monitor outputs, and, you know, however they're going to be ingested. And then maybe if you're setting to like a recording rig, the Dante stuff needs to get mapped. So, you know, I'm looking at like our production day that we had the other day. It had a couple bumps that we had, you know, but overall, everybody was in their lane, handled their job, and all the inputs got taken care of. Everything was plugged in really quickly, and we got that day knocked out. And then when we did have technical problems, we all kind of jumped in and helped each other really quickly to move past whatever the hurdle was. And it was very effective and quick to get things done. I mean, it was a long night because some of the things we ran into just were, firmware problems that required old software that nobody had or something like that. But, we had older machines that we could use to get to that. But I think that's kind of what I would look at for like a most recent example.
Okay.
I do have an example of working with a great engineer. So I used to work sound for about 7 years at the Howard Performing Arts Center, which is on the campus of Andrews University in Barron Springs. And they always had, regular, large concert series stuff. And one of the guys that came in, I remember we had rented like a Yamaha M7CL console. And I was only there as like house tech to make sure that inputs and outputs were hooked up so he could do what he needed to do to mix. And there were a couple of things like, we had an analog mic splitter on stage side, and he looked at it and he goes, "Oh man, that's perfect. That is all this show needs. We don't need any fancy schmancy, and a split of some kind. This Proco level, Pile Pro level thing is exactly what the show needs." And I'm like, that's cool that he had experience with it and knew that it was going to make the show. And then he also, like, we had the M7 rented for him, I believe. I'm trying to remember exactly. And he didn't want to, he knew that the monitor mix for the musicians was actually more important to make sure that they were happy on stage. And he didn't care what he mixed on at all, right? So he was like, let's put the M7 monitor side, so this way it's got compression every channel and all the levels will be even for their ears. And then we'll just go rock the analog house console that he's never used before, because he's just so comfortable with having stuff that he's never used thrown at him. He can go ahead and move and do whatever he needed to do. And he knew that the sound was going to be, in the ballpark regardless. So it's like, it's one of those, it's not the engineer, it's the tool, though. It's not the tool, it's the engineer, because the engineer is so good, he can use any tool. If you can make it good on a Mackie 1202, then, the engineer's good kind of thing. So I forgot his name though, and I don't remember what band it was for. So
not all at once, guys.
I had the privilege of working for quite a few years with a good team down in Florida. And we really gelled. Not only did we design and build out the church, which means we knew everything. We knew where everything was. We knew how to fix everything. That was my job. I wasn't the audio engineer. I was the fixer. If anything broke, I could fix it because I knew where everything was. So when you talk about knowing signal flow, I knew where the amps were. I knew which amp fed what speakers. I knew which cables fed what amp. I knew when we bought them. Okay. Then we had a guy who ran the studio sound. So we were just getting into streaming audio. And even back then, we had a separate mix for our stream audio as opposed to using the house audio, because we all knew that a mix for the house is going to be different than what you would want at home on the computer. Then we had the guy who led us was also an audio engineer, even though he did very little audio engineering while we were together, because he trusted each one of us. So you had knowledge, you had intricate knowledge, and you had trust. And then on top of that, we developed a great working experience. So all in all, that was the best team that I worked on. It was a combination of trust, experience, and a willingness to work together, that's a topic for another day in a church setting.
Trust?
Right.
Man, that trust thing.
Oh, trust. Yes, trust. Yes. So, Alex.
Uh-oh. Yes, Robert.
You can't avoid the question. I want to hear about one of the best teams that you worked on.
Oh, one of the best teams. I mean, my experience with teams is somewhat limited, so it's hard for me to compare. I don't have a large enough sample size.
Well, when we worked together at when was that? That was 2 years ago, 3 years ago now.
Oh, you're talking about the Living Legends?
well, I wasn't going to say their name specifically. Yes, but when
Whoops.
we worked at most
Whoops.
recent event.
Sorry, that event that will go unnamed. I'm sorry. Whoops.
How did you think that went?
I mean, one, I was doing front of house things as an A2, basically a runner, which is something that I usually don't do. So that was different for me. So I don't have enough of a sample size to actually compare that to my other experience, because most of the time I'm behind the broadcast desk. So I think it went fairly well. I think there were some moving targets that we had to address. I think the crew generally worked it out. I think there were some bumps along the road with any production, but I think ultimately most people were satisfied with how that went. And that's pretty much the most important part. You know, hitting the mark with the talent that was at that event that day is always something that can be challenging, but I think we met the needs there.
Okay. So what's next?
The best audio scenario I ever got a chance to witness was when King's Herald came over to our church to do a concert in the evening, and they set their stuff up, and it was a simplistic setup, but it was well done. And I had a chance. I was there early, and I had a chance to talk to them a little bit, and it was pretty cool. It was really, really cool, actually.
So I'm just getting comments from a viewer, and I'm answering him not live. He'll know exactly who I'm talking about. Okay, so now we talked about the build up, the history of our experience. Now we're going to get into the technical portion of the show. A lot of AV people love the technical part. So I'm going to ask you a quick roundabout fashion. What's your favorite piece of audio gear and why? Just do it quick. You don't have to wax poetic, but what's your favorite piece of audio gear and why?
Should probably let Alex go first because he's going to have a short list.
Whoa, probably. Yes, I don't have a large enough sample size. No, I like a good solid low signal. A solid, high signal to noise ratio microphone.
Well, what's an example of one?
I have built a couple, and I like those from a company out in Cali. So I'm a little bit partial to those because I get to say I made them, and they're fairly inexpensive for the quality that they push out. So that it depends, though. It depends on the source. The microphone is only as good as its source it's paired with, and the preamp behind it, and the A to D converter. But like not counting the A to D converter, like the mic and preamp and the interaction with the input. So my favorite mic depends on the source.
Go on, Greg. You know you wanted to say something.
I was going to say that's funny coming from a guy who's talking into a Shure SM7B, one of the lowest sensitivity mics that have.
I know it's actually bad. I know. I was told my volume's low.
See, this is where the audio engineers get funny. I'll talk. Okay, so Carell,
but it's got great rejection because you can't hear the fan for anything in the background.
It's clean. It's very clean.
So Carell, what's your favorite piece of audio gear?
Yes. Oh, okay. You know what? I think for me, the big thing I like to use is my speakers. So I'm very happy with my Atom A7s that I have here that I'm using to do all my mixing. The critical thing I think for any kind of situation is you got to be able to hear what you're doing quite well and trust what you're listening to, right? And if you can't, reference what you're doing properly, if you don't have a trusted set of headphones that you're used to or something that you can use to get a good reference, then I think, you can end up going to some pretty bad places very fast. So
like NS10s, you want NS10s? That's a good reference.
We don't speak about that blasphemy.
I'm surprised you didn't say a good room is your favorite piece of audio gear, because a good room makes life so much easier. But
I don't live in a world where you get to choose the room. We get venues and we got to set up for venues. Half the time we're in there was one location we set up with a domed roof. It was round. It was a round room with a domed roof. And tell me where you put your speakers in that situation.
Outside.
Okay. And then at that event, someone spilled water on my mixing console. But anyway, so Greg,
insurance coming up on AV Audio Professionals in 2 weeks.
How to commit insurance fraud. Oh no, let's not do that show.
Oh no, we have a history with that show. Let's move right along.
So I'd say my favorite piece of like audio gear, I like DSP and processing. I have to say, dude, X32, M32, bargain basement consoles that have all the DSP. Like you can that is kind of like my favorite thing.
Not those meters that are behind your head.
I guess if you had to get it down to a tool, that is one of the most useful tools, I guess. No, the X32's got a meter in it. It's a really good one. 100 band RTA.
It's 100 band in the X32?
100 band RTA. It's amazing.
I have to admit, I haven't done a lot of work with the the M32, but I still haven't done a ton of work with it. Have you guys also noticed that his meters only bounce when we're talking?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
yeah.
So he knows his audio is good. He's testing the rest of us.
Yeah, mine was low. Yeah, I feel like that was the indictment.
You should ask him about his mic array.
Oh, so okay, Alex, you were talking about how SM7B, right? You want a mic that has good signal to noise. So I'm like, well, SM7B almost the same capsule as an SM57. So I just put 3 SM57s together. So mathematically, I get 4.5 dB lower noise, better 4.5 dB better signal to noise. I don't know if you guys can tell that. You guys can't tell the difference. It sounds the same, doesn't it?
Why are you literally face bombing, Rob?
Well, it sounds good. There's a level. Like I said, I'm not an audio engineer. Andrew, before we move on, what would you consider your favorite piece of audio gear?
Well, my setup is simplistic because basically audio for me is an ancillary part of what I do. I'm primarily on the networking and infrastructure side. I like the little mixer that you got us when you set us up here. I like that.
That was a Mackie, wasn't it? Yep, that was a Mackie.
It was a Mackie.
Yeah,
a 16 channel.
Yep. I would love, and we're going to do a show on audio gear specifically. So I want to make sure that you guys come back for that, because I think that'll be crucial when we talk about the different levels of gear. And I see people turn up their nose when one person mentions a brand versus another brand. But I think it's crucial to know what gear works in what situation. My favorite piece of gear, because I do audio more for post-production, even though we run live sound each week, I haven't had an opportunity to be on the audio board for a while. But I love isotope plugins. Absolutely love isotope plugins.
You said gear. You didn't say software. Hold on. Are we qualifying this? Is gear one thing? Are we talking about hardware? Are we talking about
these days? We're talking about whatever you use to get the job done. I love my Rode Wireless Go microphones. I got 2 sets.
Is it the 2? Do you have the? Is it the original one or is it the 2?
I have both. I have the original and the double. I have my Zoom F6. I mean, I've got a lot of things, but were you going to ask a question about the Rode?
I was going to ask you if they put in the software to let you batch export the saved files that saved locally. Anyway, moving. Sorry.
They fixed that. Rode is very quick to fix. This is why I like Rode as a company. They're very quick to fix their mistakes. So anyway, I know I'm getting hate mail that says, wait, why didn't you order something from me? So Andrew, you said you're more on the networking side. Well, once again, that's a topic now that audio is networkable.
Mm-hmm.
We definitely need to talk about that because you and Greg will go back to forth about
here
layer
we
2
go.
and 3, and which is routable versus which is not. And then we can talk about AVB versus MADI versus this conversation can get so deep so quick. But now I'm going to do an exercise. Andrew, you and I won't have to discuss this at all. This is not our wheelhouse.
Okay.
But I'm going to show a picture now. I have 2 pictures of 2 different EQ settings. And James, don't say anything. Don't say a word. I have 2 different pictures. I'm going to show you the picture. I want to get your impression, first of all, of what they've done and if you would do it or if you wouldn't. All right. This is picture number 1. Take me full screen. There you go. This is an actual, no, this graph is not upside down. This is from an X32.
Yeah, dude, that looks totally fine. I think that's an appropriate EQ.
All right. Anyone from the reasonable section of people?
Hey, I mean, look, you got to do the work that's going to make the job happen. You know what I'm saying? Some things may not necessarily look great. I've had to learn that with the digital representation of what you're doing with the EQs.
All right. Okay. Let me preface this to say this was not okay. Okay. First of all, I was in that room when James and I saw this board.
Whatever
we were like,
could have been wrong with it? I can't imagine.
Once we saw this, we like, oh, now we understand why the room sounds so terrible. That was a monitor mix. So that's a stage mix.
Ugh.
Okay. Someone besides Greg, tell me what was wrong with that EQ.
I have one question. Go ahead, Alex.
I mean, the picture's a little blurry. It's a little hard to tell. No, go ahead.
I mean, okay. Did they have Barry White singing in the monitors?
If they did, it would have been 3 times as bad.
Okay. So it's first of all, for people that don't know what it is, it's an EQ spectrum graph, right? So it's the axis on the bottom is in hertz, correct? So you're going from like 20 hertz to like 15, 20K.
Correct.
I don't see it right now. Okay, there it is. Yes. Okay. So essentially what this is telling you, for the people that are intimidated this, I'll try and hopefully make this reasonable. They are boosting a lot in the low frequencies. So like a lot. So what is it? 3 dB is double the perceived loudness. There's some technical.
Go ahead, Greg. This is where Greg jumps in and explains it all for us. Go on, Greg.
I don't want to butcher this because I know it's a very specific thing, and a more seasoned audio engineer will clarify. So go ahead, Greg.
This is a common misconception. Okay, this is one of my favorite hot topics in some of these internet forums for audio is that someone will post an EQ. Yeah, someone's EQ and be like, oh, look how crazy this EQ is. That must sound awful. And everyone just ran on him for 100 comments. And people are forgetting the whole thing about what EQ is, right? EQ is not like what you see is what you get. All EQ does is that is showing what is being changed to the signal. It doesn't show the output at all. And all that matters is what the output spectrum looks like. And if we don't have that, then we can't even say if it sounds good. And so we need an output spectrum saying, what it is. I can only assume that the speaker must have been just tiny or something, and maybe it sounded fine, but I don't know. No one captured the spectrum.
Taking the high road. Yes, that's actually the correct thing to say. The assumption is if you have a fairly flat speaker, then if you make those types of boosts, then you'd be problematic. But if the speaker can't reproduce that, you would have to boost it to essentially make up for the deficits of the output device, correct?
Yeah, and we don't know because
we technically don't know. But if you have,
I do know.
Okay.
I hope I'm coming through. Your producer speaking here. I agree with everything you're saying. I do, but you weren't there, and trust me when I say it wasn't right. That was a crime against humanity.
Okay. So I will. So this is an interesting thing with audio, right? Because when it's visual things, people can circle things and point and say, well, this is wrong. But when it comes to audio, I think one of the biggest challenges when people say it sounded bad, articulating what that means is a big thing. And when you're talking about okay, let's try and make this as practical and useful as possible. If you assume that the output speaker is completely flat, it's able to reproduce all of the frequencies equally well, which is not going to happen because there is a physical limitation to the actual system because the way it's designed, right? Ideally, you try and get representation across the entire spectrum that human hearing would be able to listen to, right? So if you assume that the output is flat, you basically get into a situation where, yes, they are boosting in frequencies that are very low and they don't add clarity. And one of the challenges with getting communication about audio is someone will say it sounds bad, but what makes it sound bad? And I think one of the biggest things to improve in terms of getting better audio is learning how to articulate the problems that you're hearing. If there's a lack of intelligibility, I don't hear the words as clearly as I want, that means something. If it feels like there's too much bass, that means something. If the entire room is just vibrating violently like you're at the club, there's probably too much bass frequency. And bass isn't necessarily bad but I think the thing with audio is you want to get clarity in the elements that you know that need to be there. A good sound mix will you will know that everything is present and it will have a place to live, and being able to articulate what's wrong with something. If something sounds shrill or something sounds muddy, those are the types of things that if you want to have a dialogue about audio, I think that's something that you can try and get some vocabulary developed to actually improve. Because I literally had a situation this past weekend where we played something or something was played and someone said that sounded bad, but they didn't articulate why it sounded bad. Well, I heard that and I was like, well, it's because they used an inferior mic most likely, and there's a lot of background noise and you couldn't make out what they were saying, so they weren't very intelligible, and then it sounded, phasey and horribly digitally destroyed. But understanding how to describe that to somebody is a big thing in terms of being able to fix your audio issues. Just I don't know, I'm just taking a stab in that direction just to hopefully steer this conversation into, okay, what is the bright light for audio salvation?
I think I should jump here. Okay, so people in the audience will say, yes, this sounds good. Yes, this sounds bad. They'll tell you right away if it's bad, which is nice. And usually if it sounds bad, I believe that we are actually the first ones to recognize this. And sometimes, do we even know what to do? Like if we get a graphics playback from example, something I had to do over a couple days ago, I would say it was very bad. It was a very bad graphics playback, but it's not a live thing. It's not like there's ringing feedback. What am I supposed to do? So I had to do an EQ adjustment, and my EQ ended up looking like this. Okay. And you look at that and go, there's no way that could sound good. Well, it had to be done because of the input that was coming in. And so I turned what was bad into something that was better. But yeah, sometimes there's nothing we can do to get that last 30% to make it sound great, just because of whatever feedback or room reverb, which really affects speech intelligibility, which for whatever reason churches love reverberant rooms. So as engineers, we're stuck in a hard place where we can get it as good as we possibly can, but sometimes it'll still be bad.
I mean, I think the standard rule is garbage in, garbage out. It's mixing, not magic.
It's mixing, not magic, but we definitely need to get our turd polish skills as good as we possibly can. We can roll that turd in glitter. It's still gonna stink, but at least it'll be somewhat more pleasant.
All right. So the producer wants to say something, but I'm gonna cut him off. So
yeah.
No, go ahead. Say what you're saying.
Well, no, I agree with the sentiments that both Greg and Alex so eloquently provided. However, having been there, you are defending the indefensible. That for the room they had and the problems they were having, I don't understand what compelled them to go in that direction, because you were getting bass out of keys. And when I got my first listen, I generally thought what I was hearing was bass from the bass. I was hearing bass from the keys over literally everything else. No intelligibility. And so I understand that, different EQs are used for different situations. That was not corrective, that was additive. And for what purpose? Nobody I talked to enjoyed the sound there. Not even the sound people. So I was just
And that's a level
okay,
of
wait,
experience that needs to be, yeah.
I don't want to go down that hole because I do want to talk about what Greg and Alex said is 100% true. So this graph I'm showing you, you're right, it's not fair. We haven't told you what the problem was. We just showed you a graph. And you're right, that graph can mean anything. If you're dealing with, let's say you have a shotgun microphone and you're trying to pick up bug sounds. Well, the shotgun microphone does not have good bass response. So you might want to bring up what's in the bass so you can get those, the deeper sounding bugs, maybe a frog, a bullfrog. If you wanted to get a bullfrog, you're going to be pulling up these frequencies. If you want to get crickets, you pull up a different frequency. So Corel, you've been quiet. I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to put the picture back up and I'm going to explain what the situation is.
Okay.
You can put it full screen. This was a monitor mix. These are Mackie Thumper, I believe those are 15-inch speakers that are stage monitors. There was no intelligibility on the stage, zero. Everyone sounded like mud. Sopranos sounded like tenors, sounded like altos. So my question to you is, how would you fix this?
Can we define mud for the audience?
Okay, so mud is where it sounds as if your head is in mud, basically. People can be singing to you, perfect, Corral. People can be singing their hearts out, but all you get is low end, no intelligibility, no clarity in the words. Everything is just, sounds like it's the same frequency.
Okay.
So Corral, how would you fix that?
So the first things first, right? If I'm coming into a situation, because I've had to do this with many groups that I work with, and I'm going into a situation where the church, has their board set up or whatever, and pretty much I look at it and I'm like, after listening to something going on in the service, and seeing how they fly the board during the day, then I go make my corrections for the concert. But sometimes I don't have that luxury. So if I'm going to correct it, the very first thing I'm going to do is I usually try to zero things out as best as I can, right? So board EQs, especially if it's a digital board, I'll just call up a new scene, flatten everything out, and then start with something basic like the filters, right? Just because you have certain frequencies doesn't mean that you have to have them all there, right? So you can start filtering out the stuff that you really don't need from some of those instruments or the other sources. That's the first place I would start. Then, you also got to listen to the PA, right? So in context, if they have some funky EQs, I might flatten that out and then see if I can get that going, with something that'll give me something clear. Now, the key thing here too is this, right? I don't just go and arbitrarily do that. I usually go with pink noise. Right? Why? Anybody? Greg?
Bueller?
Well, I mean, you could do pink noise. It's got that slope that you want. You can also do a sine sweep, but I think pink noise is really fast and like you can really get, stuff ready to go really quick.
So for those that don't know, right, you have pink noise and you have white noise and all these, different types of analytics things you can do. But the pink noise specifically has every frequency in the spectrum basically equal level. Whereas white noise, it's very, very drastic in between because of the certain loudness and of the frequency bandwidths of each of the things. So they're not all equal. So because they're all traveling at different rates, you're going to hear things all sporadic and all over the place. So the pink noise kind of gives you that equal, feel of all frequencies at equal loudness. And then you're able to kind of assess where you're at. Then you have a very good analytics tool, right? Very good analytics tool. Some people have apps on their phones that they can use that would allow them to kind of just do the analytics. Or if the digital board has it, you can do it at the board. And so you just kind of look and see, okay,
So
what's present here?
what's that analytics tool look like? It's a spectrum analyzer, right?
Spectral analyzer.
Yeah.
So basically, what Greg's got running
What's
in the
right
background.
behind me? Yeah. What's
Yeah.
right behind me? Oh, yeah, like that.
I'm just trying to spell it out. Just
So-
I know nothing, so I'm trying to just make sure I get an idea
Well,
of what I'm
well,
talking about. Yeah.
hanging on to that, let me get, do you guys have any good suggestions about RTA tools? I know your audiences, since this is audio, they want suggestions on things.
Mhm.
What are some good analyzer tools? I know, Greg, you have a free one, which I need to write down again.
Dude, if you're doing room tuning and it's free, right? Room EQ Wizard is amazing. You can set your target curve, it'll automatically create the output filters for you. I mean, it is nuts. And it's free. It's Java based also, so you can run it on like Mac, Linux, Windows, whatever.
All right.
So for those of you that are iOS fans, or have an iOS device,
We'll pray for you.
I have an app called Analyzer. So, it's kind of giving you, pretty good real-time stuff, and you can weight it and even change, some of the way that the graphs represent. So you kind of get that going. So you get different options for what you can use. Now, Greg's probably going to look at this and be like, I can definitely tell he's using a very cheap, phone mic, because, y'all might see there's a certain drop off at a certain frequency point, but it gets you in the wheelhouse of what you need to do. And the big thing is just kind of trying to find the problems quickly and then address them, as best as you can, and make the changes you need to make. So, and then in terms of the monitors, my big thing is that not everything needs to be in there. So again, with the filters, you can kind of filter out some of the junk that doesn't need to be in the source. So that way, when you're sending it to monitor or whatever, not all of the content from it is going there, and then if you need to, because I've had this happen, I went into a church, they had EQ on the monitor, but it still sounded woofy. It was just too dark, way too dark. You couldn't get any clarity out of it. And I just had to throw a high pass filter on that thing, up pretty high just to get it to kind of, calm down. I think the tweeter in it might have been blown, whatever they had on stage, but we had to get it as clear as we could for the show.
High pass filter. What is that?
High pass filter. It lets pass certain high frequencies, and at the crossover point, it'll start to cut off certain lower end frequencies on the spectrum.
All right. Since our time is running short, I'm going to ask you audio engineers one last question. We talk about RTAs as real-time analyzers, which are behind Greg's head. We're talking about graphs. We're talking about loudness meters. We're talking about all of these things. What is the best way for young engineer, well, any engineer, young, old, and in between, to learn how to properly read a graph? I love spectrum analyzer graphs. Love them. It's almost like looking at the Matrix. Yes, love those things. They're so unique, but once you can read them, they're really powerful tools. What's the best way for young, old, and middle-aged engineers to learn how to use those tools?
Okay, I guess I'll go first. So what I've learned is that, there's a lot of these boomer engineers. I don't want to say boomer engineers, people that are older, that are, say, from the analog days, that are like, they go, trust your ears. And that's some of the absolute worst advice you could ever tell someone, because they've never, if you tell a volunteer, hey, trust your ears, and they've never worked with the reference system, they've never been in the studio, they've never done anything.
Or they can't hear.
Or they can't, because they're, retired or something, can't hear above 12K. It's the worst advice is to say trust yours, because they can't, who knows what their car even sounds like. It's probably awful. So I say always use a spectrum analyzer and your ears. The more senses that you can combine together to get an accurate representation of what the sound is the best way to go. Now, that being said, what they don't tell you about these RTAs is that they don't read the spectrums equally. So like Carell was talking about pink noise versus white noise, pink noise being flat in acoustic sense being flat, where white noise in acoustic sense actually raises up in, I forget how many dB per octave. So it gets brighter and brighter as the sound goes up. So it's important to make sure that you can adjust your spectrum analyzer for that tilt, that corrective tilt, to achieve pink noise showing flat. And then when you're doing sound check, I actually never actually EQ something to look flat on the spectrum analyzer that's representing pink noise accurately. I make sure that it's got like a bit of a bass tilt. I guess that would be this way for you guys watching. Usually like 1.5 dB per octave. And that is like the target. It's about achieving targets, right? That is my 2 cents. Who's next?
I will say the best place to learn how to learn. Okay, first of all, don't let the math freak you out. YouTube mileage may vary as far as there, but I mean, it is a great resource. You can probably find a video on just about everything. If you find the manufacturer of a good plugin, they usually have in-depth tutorials about what those meters are telling you, and potentially, find someone that has done it. Not everybody's going to be as good. I mean, there are going to be some engineers that are more, like I said kind of earlier about, good versus great. There may be an engineer that's more technical that speaks your language, and then there may be someone that's a little bit more artistic that can help you. I mean, I think you solicit information and put a lot of it together. In terms of like reading the graphs, I think understanding what it's showing you and what you need to get out of it, I think those are the big things to ask. And ultimately, if you're talking about certain things, you do have to trust your ears. And Greg explained why that can be difficult when you're starting, but one of the things is getting reference material to compare against, to kind of build up your information database and kind of, okay, does this track sound good? Like some of the classics, just getting that database of information to then, if you can run your analyzer on that, maybe you can see what's in there. And that's just an idea. I mean, I still have problems hearing certain things. So it's nice to know what frequencies to go for, but it's a little bit of both. You have to marry the two, the technical side and honestly, as you hone and train your ear in a very prescribed way, you can start to trust your ears as well.
So I'm gonna throw a little bit of a monkey wrench in here, because so I was in a mix class and we were analyzing people's mixes. And on the trust your ear front, it's great unless you have hearing damage. Right? Let that sink in for a second. We had a guy who would go out on tour in our class and basically had destroyed his hearing at about 1 to 2K.
Ouch.
So all of his mixes were up at 1 to 2K consistently, because that's what made it sound balanced to him. And it got to the end of the semester and the professor was kind of like, hey, you're going to want to go get your hearing tested. And I think eventually they did do that, and they found out that they did have some hearing loss because they had been in situations with different touring opportunities they had where they did not protect their ears, with the proper hearing equipment or attenuation equipment for their earplugs. So the ear thing is kind of relative, because if you have damaged hearing, you may not even know. Okay, so I would advocate, just like Greg said, learn how to use those tools and use them well. And if you have a knowledge gap, try to go find reputable articles or videos that will give you appropriate information. And if you don't know where to find it, you can always ask somebody. One great resource is the Audio Engineering Society. They've got great papers on a lot of things. And if you don't want to get into the white papers and really dig into the technical stuff, there are people that'll break them down, that are out there. But the key thing is yes, you let your ear be the judge, kind of just say, hey, something's off, but you want to trust but verify, and the verify part I think is huge. So use the analytical tools that you have at your disposal, because they weren't as readily available. They were very expensive back in the day to have them, but now every device that's digital pretty much has it, and you should learn how to use it and use it well. So that's why I throw that caveat in there, because with the loudness at which people are listening to their music now, and blasting things through their headphones or listening
Earbuds. Earbuds.
Yeah, but the earbuds specifically, that actually causes a lot of hearing damage, and they may not be aware. So it's just something to consider.
We used to have a pastor who, when he got up to speak, he was always saying, bring me up in the monitors, bring me up in the monitors. We're trying to figure out why. We're looking at the meters, we're looking at everything. Why? One day I had to go speak to him while the praise team was singing. And in the 3 seconds I was up there, I nearly went deaf. It was so loud during praise and worship. By the time he got up to speak, he couldn't hear anything. Mm-hmm. So it really didn't matter how high we pushed up his monitor, where we're blasting out the rest of the church. You could turn off the house speakers and just feed the church from the monitors. He couldn't hear anything. So, gentlemen, as time has run out on us, I want to show you one last graph and get your opinion. What do you think?
Looks great. Looks great. Absolutely A+. Good job.
I'm not taking Greg anywhere.
I think he's a riot. He's good. You should have him back.
Oh, thanks, guys.
It's, again, you should always listen to what you're doing, but we're gonna go with the assumptions that the output is reasonable, right? It's probably a bit much. So there are schools of thought on EQ, and I don't dare to be an expert, but I think, depending on the environment you're in, some people will cut instead of boost. You actually can get a perceived boost by cutting. And I think that is something that I know in the church environment, a lot of people tend to want to boost. I think there's a lot of value in cutting, but that's just maybe where I've been trained or what I've seen. So it's probably a little aggressive. Just not to, again, you have to do it based on hearing, but visually it seems aggressive to me.
That is a snare drum, by the way. It's a snare drum.
Okay, no jokes aside, I actually honestly agree with that EQ. I think I would do something similar to that. Okay, well, I'm inviting you to that location soon, and you'll be able to tell the difference. You will eventually be working with that snare drum. So we will compare. We will come back. I promise all the viewers, we will come back, and in a few weeks, we will see if his final EQ looks anything like this. Listen, gentlemen, I want to thank you guys for joining us. And as always, if there are any questions or comments on this topic or any other topic you guys might want us to cover, just email us through YouTube or Facebook, and we'll be more than happy to get back to you on this and many other topics. As always, this is us signing off. Thank you, Greg. Thanks, Carell. Thanks, Alex. And thank you, Andrew, for your contributions today. And we're going to have this conversation again. I think it's going to be necessary. All right, gentlemen. And James, take us out.